All right. We will get there. There will be chickens. I'm going to warn you now. There are pretty much always chickens in a presentation I do, as my coworkers have learned. So let's talk about tagging at Elastic, where we are working across multiple clouds. But first, a little bit about me. I'm a capacity site reliability engineer at Elastic. That means I deal primarily with um, all of the resources and making sure we have them, making sure they're compliant. There's a lot that goes into capacity management. Um, I'm also a productivity podcaster, chicken dad, as I said. This is a photo of my little rooster lucky man and myself. Um, my wife is the science fiction fantasy author Ursula Vernon and aka T Kingfisher, and we spend a lot of time visiting conventions all over the country and world. I play games and I go to metal concerts and I make stuff on my new laser engraver, among other things. There's a lot going on there. But we're not here to talk about me. We are here to talk about tagging at Elastic. So let's start with some background. We weren't tracking cloud usage for our R&D spend at all prior to 2022. Just a big number and a big lump of cloud resources. We were tracking customer and production level usage because that's our bread and butter. Um, and regular cadence on meetings on that. But what about the R&D spend? That represents 127 individual accounts slash subscriptions, depending on your CSP, across the three major cloud providers, AWS, Azure, and GCP. We had no consistent tagging. Some groups tagged, some groups didn't. And what they tagged and how they tagged was very haphazard. And the big question came out is, how do we find out who is running what and if it's still in use? So first thing we had to do was to define a tagging policy. We set up a cross-functional team and we set goals on things like what the tags should be, what the values of those tags should be, how do we enforce them. All of that was part of the goal setting, and then the eventual implementation. And then we set timelines for that implementation. And the first part is socializing the policy, which is, as many people have said, communicating your policies is important, and it's often the hardest part of anything. We're still getting questions. It's been over a year. We're still getting questions about if people are doing it right. So that's always an interesting thing. The next step was to enable reporting so that we could find out and start to say to people, hey, this is not compliant. When we enable enforcement, it's going to be actioned on. And that was, I think, an important step, that by enabling all the reporting on the different accounts, the different resources in advance, so that people could make their own remediations before they woke up one day to, hey, my resource is gone. Why was my resource turned off, et cetera, et cetera. It was really important and helped with some of the goodwill in understanding the policy. And then the last step was enabling enforcement, following a pretty standard pattern. Mark for op, that first op is shut down with a mark for op delete that will remove things after 30 days, because we want to give people a chance to correct and bring it back up. And the third step was to reduce our waste and spending. And that is an ongoing process. But we made significant improvements just by starting and implementing this policy. Now, how did we do it? And I think this is the big thing. We've got, like I said, 3 CSPs, a whole bunch of accounts. All of them manage things slightly different. So what we did was we wrote a Go wrapper around C7N org that pushes the logs to Elasticsearch. I mean, we're Elastic. We have Elasticsearch. It makes sense, right? So the binary, the Go binary itself creates one Elasticsearch index per policy with enrichment and lifecycle policies, or per custodian policy. And then it creates and populates an index with the user information from the CSPs over who created what. And this becomes important when we run C7 and org, capture those logs, put it into Elastic. We now can say, okay, this resource was created by and theoretically owned by a specific person. All of the configuration for this we store in Kubernetes config maps, and Kubernetes secrets is where we keep all the authentication tokens. We are generating, using templates, we're generating about 83 custodian policies individual that run across the accounts in each CSP. And we package the whole thing with Helm and have a CI/CD pipeline that does all of the building, packaging, and deployment. So in a lot of ways, we don't have to do anything except update a template file or update a values file with account information and maybe a new rule, and the rest of it just happens. We're using Elastic as a single pane of glass. We could be logging each CSP's information to its own method using the built-in custodian functions. But because we're Elastic and because we wanted a holistic view, what we're doing is we've got dashboards set up for it. We've got all of the indexes, and using our own technology, we're able to create a dashboard that shows us everything. Initially, when we started with a small percentage of the accounts, we had 168 compliant resources and 2,147 non-compliant resources. This is a drop in the bucket overall of what we have. You can see from the chart, which is showing from April 2023 to present, basically, that non-compliance increases as additional CSPs, accounts, rules, those sorts of things are brought into enablement, and then as it's enforced and we start to do cleanup, you see that sharp reduction. Occasionally, you'll see errors in data or where we pushed a bad config and it didn't run properly. That's the gap in data in October of last year. And now what this allows us to do is, using Elasticsearch, do some deep dives, because we now have all of the output from Custodian as documents in Elastic going all the way back to April of last year, and can start to look for things like anomalies, additional processes. One of the things that is particularly challenging are people who their thing was stopped, so they just start it back up. They don't make any changes, and 24 hours later it gets shut down again. But then they just start it because they know they're not doing it right, but this is the most expedient way for them to keep working. We're also able to generate basically a daily summary of where everything is, in terms of what tags are missing, what we have as compliant and non-compliant in the environment. As you can see, we're not really enforcing on storage yet. That's something that is a bit of a challenge. People are like, well, you can't delete my storage. I need that 4-year-old bucket with data that we used 3 years ago, just in case. So there's still some challenges there, but we're able to generate and then deep dive into, okay, what exactly is non-compliant? Who owns it? What CSP is it on? What tags are missing? Which of our core required tags is missing? And what machines are those? And this also allows our users to do the same thing. And we can visualize in a much more robust way changes over time. You'll notice Azure is missing from this. We're doing some permission changes with Azure, and that's causing it not to run in that environment at the moment. But what we can see is, over time, we can see things like spikes, where, someone spun up a lot of something and then spun it back down. Usually that's an indication we have it's our CI/CD pipeline, that they were there for 24 hours and then they were gone. And so that's one of the things we can start to track. Okay, we know these spikes are happening. What accounts are they? Where can we save money? Where can we get better tracking? So Custodian solves a lot of the technical challenges of tracking and enforcing our policies, but there's still challenges. For some teams, tagging is considered technical debt for the automation they've already built. And so we have to get, not only do we have their buy-in, but now we have to get on their development roadmap on in their improvements for their own tooling to have them become compliant with our policies. We are constantly reviewing to make sure that things are accurate and applicable. We've created a new department that's going to require new tags to enforce. And since we enforce specific values and specific tags, you can't just say, oh, my organization is, chicken farm. That's not a valid tag, and we will flag it. So we have to make sure that as these new departments, new parts of the organization are brought in, that the tag values match appropriately. And then we still need to work on some processes for new resources as they come online. We have one group that can spin up literally anything in AWS, and at the moment, we're primarily focused on compute and storage because that's where our biggest spend is. But we don't have the push right now to investigate things like, well, are we spending enough or are we spending too much on ingress controllers or something along those lines? And so we're working to address these new resources, these new cloud types as they're coming online to bring them into the fold, as it were. And that is the quick overview of how Elastic is using custodian to tag on three in a multi-cloud environment, and then using Elastic itself to provide a view. So hey, I've got time for questions. I left time for questions, and I finished a little early, so we're not going to run over time, right?
Perfect. It's break time anyway, so we can probably do a early break afterward. But there have been a lot of Q&A, but it was great presentation.
Yep.
I guess I learned about chickens. Any questions around tagging? Did I miss anything?
I mean, I'll answer questions on tagging, podcasting, chickens, custodian, you know.
No, absolutely. How many chickens do you have?
Currently, my flock is 21. There are 4 roosters, and they have figured out their hierarchy and usually stand up to hen drama. And by stand up, I mean they stand up and get out of the way. So yeah, but it's interesting, and I think I collected, although I'd missed the day, about 19 eggs last night, which is a little off for being in the winter. But yeah, also if you're in Central North Carolina and you need eggs, contact me offline. I can probably hook you up.
Not too far away, but for sure. But I think there was I think there's some jokes in there that you can read about Elastic in there.
Oh yeah.
And integrating with Elastic, I think you mentioned that, right? There was a request there, like probably Elastic. Is there a plan for that, or?
So that's one of the things I'm working out with my manager and our executive team. I would love to build a Elastic connector to be able to put the logs natively into Elastic. The other thing that we have talked about is because the Elastic Cloud Service itself supports tagging on the Elasticsearch clusters that our customers use, building a provider to allow others to use Custodian to manage or or check tagging or compliance of their actual Elasticsearch clusters inside of our cloud service is certainly something that I would like to see, and that we have talked about getting on our roadmap on the capacity team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I definitely heard at KubeCon as well a couple of requests from having a provider for Elastic itself. I don't know if there are any Elastic users on this call right now, and they're willing to share, but I think that would be a cool integration as well, like
Yep.
letting Custodian go beyond clouds in Elastic's domain as well.
Yeah, and we'll be myself and one of my coworkers, we will be at SRECon next month, and we will be talking there. So and I'll be at the booth. So if you have any other questions or comments or just want to talk about chickens, you can see me there as well.
No, absolutely. Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Kevin is pretty active in the Custodian Slack too, so please find him there. Thank you so much for this talk.
Yep, absolutely.